Hey gang, and welcome back. Just a reminder, you can now use the promo code MTGMudsta, all caps, at flipsidegaming.com. You'll get 10% off orders over $10 and help with the channel at the same time. Welcome back, my friends. This is another EDH gameplay video just for your viewing pleasure. This week, I am playing Matt's Temmet deck, and I keep a hand with Island, Plains, Aven Wind Guide, Duelist Heritage, Batterskull, Supplant Form, and Arcane Denial. Rob is back and playing his Mathas deck and keeps a hand with Curse of Opulence, Terramorphic Expanse, Cabal, Swamp, Archfiend of Depravity, Solemn Simulacrum, and Azor's Gateway. Jonathan, who's new to the channel, is playing Hapatra and keeps a hand with Blood Artist, 2 Swamps, Evolving Wilds, a Forest, Amit Eternal, and Soul Stinger. And lastly, Good Guy Joe is back and he's playing Endrek Sahr and keeps a hand with 2 Swamps, Yeheni, Xulaport Cutthroat, Dimir Machinations, and Skull Collector. Joe wins the die roll and starts us off. Joel plays a swamp and passes. I play an island and also pass. Rob plays and cracks his Terramorphic Expanse to find a basic. Jonathan plays his Evolving Wilds and also cracks it to find a basic. Joe plays a swamp and casts Xulaport Cutthroat. I play a Plains and I cast my commander, Temmet. Rob plays Temple of Silence, scrying the top card to the bottom of his library. He then casts Curse of Opulence on Jonathan and passes. Jonathan plays a swamp and casts Hapatra. Joe plays a Phyrexian Tower and pays 3 to cast Yeheni. He swings it at John for 2, who takes it, and he and his brother gain a gold token. I play an island and am tempted to swing at Jonathan, but I don't want to give Rob another gold token, so I pass my turn. Rob plays a Plains and casts Mathas. At the end of turn, he puts the bounty counter on the Xulaport Cutthroat. Jonathan plays a swamp and casts Amit Eternal. He swings Hapatra at Joe, who blocks the Cutthroat as he knows it's going to die anyway and prevents 2 commander damage to himself. This has Rob, John, and myself each drawing a card, and the whole table gains 1 life. This is because Joe gets 1 life from his Cutthroat, and we all lose 1 from the Cutthroat, so we all end up with 1 extra life. Joe untaps and sacrifices his gold token to pay for a Cryptcast, which has Jonathan putting a counter on his Eternal and getting a Snake token. I counter Joe's Cryptcast with an Arcane Denial, and this gives Jonathan's Eternal another counter, and therefore gains him another Snake. On my upkeep, Joe draws 2 while I draw 1, and I draw for turn. I then play a Meandering River at my land for turn, and pass. Rob plays a swamp and swings Mathas at John. He gains a gold token, and John blocks Mathas with his 2 snakes. This also has the benefit of Yeheni gaining 2+1/+1 counters, but they don't last long as Rob casts Rout in his second main phase to wipe the board. On Jonathan's turn, he plays a forest and recasts Hapatra. Joe doesn't seem to be able to draw land anymore, so he casts the Skull Collector and passes turn. I play a Plains and pay 4 to cast a Bone Horde. I then cast Steel Shaper's Gift and reveal Bloodforged Battleaxe before passing to Rob. Rob plays a Rugged Prairie, and I'm excited for the reprints, and casts Cabal. He then passes turn. Jonathan plays a Forest and casts Obelisk Spider, and passes turn. Joe has no choice but to return the Skull Collector to his hand on his upkeep, and rather than recasting the Ogre, he casts Sign and Blood in his main phase, losing 2 life to draw 2 cards. Did I say he lost 2 life? I really meant 4, because Cabal drains him for 2 as well, just to rub the salt in the wound. Joe does hit the land though, but it comes into play tapped as he reveals Crypt of Agadim. As a sign of good faith though, plus he has to discard down to 7, Joe bins 2 creatures to buff up my Bone Horde in hopes that I don't smash into him, but Rob instead. I play an Evolving Wilds and pay 3 to cast Duelist Heritage. I get drained for Cabal, and I don't really like being drained, so I decide to swing the Bone Horde at Rob, giving it double strike with my Heritage. Rob responds to my Heritage trigger by casting Anguished Unmaking to exile the equipment. I use this opportunity to cast Rapid Hybridization to get some preemptive revenge on Cabal, and get drained for 2. During my second main phase, I cast the Bloodforged Battleaxe and crack my Evolving Wilds to go and find a basic. Rob casts #SadSolemn and grabs a basic Swamp. He then moves to combat, swinging his new beast at John, who in turn blocks with his Spider. Jonathan gets to put a -1/-1 counter on the beast and gains a Snake token as well. This also triggers the Obelisk Spider, and Rob, Joe, and myself lose 1, while Jonathan gains 1. Rob then sacrifices his gold token and taps his mountain to cast Azor's Gateway. Jonathan plays Bojuka Bog and exiles Joe's graveyard. He then swings Hapatra at Joe, and upon connecting, gets to put a -1/-1 counter on Rob's beast. This gives Jonathan another snake, and he gets to drain everyone for 1 again. Jonathan then casts Harmonize to draw 3, and discards a card at the end of his turn before passing to Joe. Unfortunately for Joe, the graveyard exile really put a damper on his turn, and he has to cast Diabolic Tutor for a land. He grabs a swamp, plays it, and casts Thoughtpicker Witch. For my turn, in my main phase, I pay 5 to cast a Batterskull and pass to Rob. Rob casts an Archfiend of Depravity on his turn, which really doesn't hurt anyone but Jonathan. He then passes turn. Jonathan plays a Grasping Dunes and sacrifices it to put a -1/-1 counter on the Archfiend. John gains a snake and drains the table for 1. He then casts Stinging Shot to put the 3 final counters needed to kill the Archfiend on it. This gives Jonathan another snake and another drain. Jonathan then moves to combat and swings Hapatra and the spider at Joe. Joe blocks Hapatra with the Witch and takes 1. Jonathan then casts Rampant Growth in his second main phase and passes turn. Joe casts Beseech the Queen to grab an Ancient Tomb and he plays it as his land for turn. He then pays 3 mana, taking 2 from the tomb, to cast Scrib Nibblers, which now may be my favorite card name of all time. With nothing else, he passes to me. For my turn, King Tut Jr. rejoins the fray, and I gear up the Batterskull to hold an axe. We then move to combat, and I put Temmet's trigger on the skull. Jonathan's been gaining a lot of life at this point, so it's only fair that I get some back, so I swing the skull at him and give it double strike. This means I get to hit him twice for 7, and I gain 2 token copies of the axe, and deal 14 damage, and gain 14 life. At the end of my turn, Rob activates his Gateway and exiles Kulrath Knight. Rob plays an Arcane Lighthouse as his land for turn, and casts a Heliod's Pilgrim to find an aura. He grabs Overwhelming Splendor, and I have a feeling I know where it's going to go. Rob then passes turn. Jonathan plays a Swamp and casts Uncage the Menagerie, where X is 3. He grabs Dusk Urchins, 1 Volley Beast Tracker, and Elder of Laurels. Jonathan then casts the Dusk Urchins and moves to combat. He swings Hapatra and the Obelisk Spider at Rob. Rob decides to block Hapatra with Solemn and draws while it dies and takes 1 from the spider. Joe starts his turn, and we all realize I should have a gold token from attacking Jonathan earlier. He then decides to transmute Dimir Machinations, taking 2 from the tomb to go and find Phyrexian Rager. Joe then casts the Rager and loses 1 life and draws 1 card. Joe then taps the Scrib Nibblers to exile the top card of Jonathan's library, and then plays a land for turn, untapping the Nibblers. I play a Port Town tap for my turn and put another Battle Axe onto the Batterskull. Moving to combat, I give the Batterskull Temmet's trigger and swing it at Rob, giving it double strike. This means Rob gets hit twice for 9, and I gain 4 Battle Axes plus 18 life. At the end of my turn, Rob activates his Gateway, drawing and then exiling Feldar's Sovereign, since he doubts he'll be getting anywhere close to 50 anytime soon. Rob plays a Shadowblood Ridges as land for turn and surveys the table. He asks John if they're good, and John says they are provided he doesn't get hit with the Overwhelming Splendor. Unfortunately, this means that I become the target of Splendor, and with nothing else, Rob passes. Jonathan pays 4 and casts Soul Stinger. He puts the counter on his Dusk Urchins and gains another Snake token and drains us all for 1. Jonathan then swings Hapatra at Rob and the Dusk Urchins at Joe. The Dusk Urchins immediately get a -1/-1 counter, which gives Jonathan another drain and another Snake token, and then dies. He then draws 3 cards, and we get to see good guy Joe come in again and save the day, and he casts Darkness to save his brother from taking the hit. In his second main phase, Jonathan plays Desert of the Indomitable and casts Blowfly Infestation. At the end of turn, Joe activates Scrib Nibblers and exiles John's Into the Wild off the top. Joe activates the Nibblers once more in his main phase and hits Disentomb from Jonathan. Joe then plays a Baron Moor and untaps the Nibblers. He then takes 2 life loss from the Ancient Tomb and casts Fallen Ideal on his Rager. He then passes to me. I play an island for my turn and put 2 axes onto Temmet. I then move to combat and swing both of my creatures at Rob, giving Temmet the double strike from the Heritage. Rob decides to get a little bit crazy and blocks with his Pilgrim and the Beast, knowing fully well that if his Beast dies, John will be able to create an infinite loop to drain the table out. This forces my hand, and I have to cast Pongify on Jonathan's Obelisk Spider, so I don't immediately lose the game. We then move to combat damage, and Rob loses his blockers, and I gain 9 life. John still gets his Blowfly trigger, and puts the -1/-1 counter on the troublesome Scrib Nibblers. With the trigger on the stack, Joe activates the Nibblers to exile John's top card. Jonathan reveals Tendershoot Dryad, and Joe sacrifices his Nibbler to the Phyrexian Tower to float 2 black mana. Before transitioning phases, Joe taps 3 more lands to cast Dictate of Erebos. And at the end of my turn, Rob once again activates his Gateway and exiles a Nomad Outpost. Rob recasts Mathas in his main phase and casts Authority of the Consuls. At the end of his turn, he gets to put the bounty counter on my Germ token and passes. Jonathan plays a Blood Artist who comes into play tapped and gives Rob 1 life. John then casts Splendid Agony to try and create another infinite loop. He targets Temmet and one of his own snakes. Joe decides to sacrifice his Rager, forcing us all to sacrifice a creature. I sack the Germ token, hoping to have Rob and Joe drawn to an answer, but they whiff. Joe then discards Fairy Macabre to exile Obelisk Spider and Dusk Urchins from Jonathan's graveyard. Now this is a tricky part, but because Rob has authority, John can't actually kill him. What this means is that Jonathan goes through the cycle enough times to kill Joe and myself this game, and both he and Rob gain an absurd amount of life because of it. Jonathan then moves to combat and swings the Ape, 5 Snakes, and the Soul Stinger at Rob for 13. Jonathan then casts Elder of Laurels in his second main phase and passes turn. At the end of turn, Rob activates the Gateway and exiles a Mesa Enchantress. Rob plays an isolated chapel for his land for turn and recasts his general. He then passes to John, putting a bounty counter on John's ape. John casts one volley beast tracker, who comes in tapped and gives Rob 1 life, and John goes to find Razaketh and puts it on top. John then casts serrated arrows and moves to combat, swinging 6 snakes at Rob, who takes the hit. At the end of his turn, Rob activates the gateway, exiling Thought Vessel and transforming the gateway, gaining 5 life and revealing Sanctum of the Sun. Oh my. Rob then plays Kabira Crossroads, gaining 2 more life, and tapping all of his lands and his Sanctum, casts Torment of the Hailfire, where X is 115. Game review time. So I really wasn't expecting such a brutal combo to come out of Jonathan. I realize now that I didn't really explain it in the game, but the combo involved basically having some way to drain a player, Blowfly Infestation, and Hapatra out. Basically what happens is Blowfly Infestation sees a creature dying with a -1/-1 counter, and then puts another counter on another creature. This in turn triggers Hapatra, and makes another snake. What this boils down to is Jonathan basically puts a counter on a snake, kills the snake, but because the snake dies to a -1/-1 counter, it also triggers Hapatra and the Blowfly Infestation, which then recycles and repeats itself again and again and again. Jonathan was able to win by having either the Obelisk Spider or the Blood Artist out. I was able to prevent the first loop from happening by killing the Obelisk Spider, but I was not ready for the Blood Artist that Jonathan's had in his hand since the beginning of the game. As much as I love Azor's Gateway, I don't know if this game was a perfect representation of how good it is. I mean, Rob was able to tap it for like 115 or whatever mana, but the likelihood of it lasting that long was very, very surprising, and the fact that no one had any way to remove it was just as surprising. I feel bad for Joe. He was excited to show off his Endrek Sahr deck, but it really didn't get to do anything, and most of his tutors were unfortunately spent finding lands. There are very few times where this is what your deck wants to be doing so late into the game, and unfortunately Joe really struggled most of it. He did try to play politically, but unfortunately it didn't help him in the end. This game taught me that Bloodforged Battle Axe is kind of a crazy card when it comes to Double Strike. I was getting so many copies of the axe, it was pretty absurd, and Matt's told me that he's had upwards of 30 plus before. It would have been even more broken had I had something like Sigarda's 8 on the field and be able to keep attaching them for free onto my creatures. But that's kind of Magical Christmas Land. Please be sure to tune in every Monday and Thursday at 11 AM Eastern Standard Time for a guaranteed new video. You can also follow me on Twitter at MTGMudsta. You can find me on Facebook at facebook.com/mtgmudsta. And lastly, you can check me out when I stream at twitch.tv/mtgmudsta. This video is brought to you in support by my patrons. If you're looking for a way to help out the channel, please be sure to visit the link below. Thank you all for watching this video, and don't forget, friends are just opponents you haven't eliminated yet.